On this day, January 15th, in 1929, at 501 Auburn Avenue, Northeast, in Atlanta, Georgia, Martin Luther King Jr. was born. This city, Atlanta, Georgia, would be the home of Martin Luther King Jr. for about the next 15 or so years. On September 20th, 1944, Martin Luther King Jr. enrolled at Morehouse College, surprising many people, but also making his family overjoyed. Later, on February 25th, 1948, he became an assistant pastor at the Ebenezer Baptist Church with his father, who he called Daddy King. Fun fact, current Georgian Senator Kelly Loeffler will be replaced by Raphael Warnock, who himself is actually the current pastor at this church. However, being a senator is a busy job, so I'm not sure if he'll continue to be. Anyways, back to MLK. Later, in 1948, MLK graduated Morehouse College with a bachelor's degree in sociology. MLK would later look for a bigger college, which is exactly what he would do. On September 13th, 1951, Martin Luther King Jr. began grad school at the Boston University's School of Theology. 1 year later, in 1952, MLK met his future wife, Coretta Scott. They later married a year later in 1953. After, MLK graduated from the Boston University School of Theology in 1955 with a doctorate. Impressive, right? Unfortunately for Martin Luther King Jr., good news turned to bad news, as on January 30th, 1956, a few people who were obviously racist targeted MLK's house, and they actually bombed it. Thankfully, none of the King family was at the house at the time, and no one was hurt, but man, that must have been hard for them. I don't know why you'd have to get your house bombed because of the color of your skin. On May 17th, 1957, Martin Luther King Jr. gained fame across the nation after his first national speech in Washington, D.C. It was known as Give Us the Ballot, and it campaigned for the right to vote for African Americans. On June 23rd, 1958, Martin Luther King Jr. met with U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, along with other civil rights leaders, to discuss ways that they could help African American people. Eisenhower was very supportive of MLK, which is something that MLK was grateful for. On September 20th, 1958, an assassination attempt against MLK failed. A mentally ill woman stabbed MLK in the chest with a letter opener. Thankfully, MLK wasn't killed, but if you had any idea how close to death he got, you'd be surprised. His doctor told him, the doctor told MLK that if you sneezed, that would have killed you. So yeah, that's how close to death MLK was at this time. Thankfully, MLK didn't sneeze, as he later said, just without MLK in it. On October 19th, 1960, MLK was arrested while at a sit-in demonstration in Atlanta, Georgia. He was luckily bailed out for $2,000. A sit-in is when people sit at a place and refuse to leave until they get service, which they were denied. On December 16th, 1961, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested again while at a desegregation meetup in Albany, Georgia. He was released once again. On July 27th, 1962, MLK was arrested yet again while at a vigil in the same city of Albany, Georgia. A month later, at a conference in Birmingham, Alabama, Martin Luther King Jr. was slapped in the face by a U.S. Nazi Party member. That's just mean. Give MLK a break, people. And we have arrived at the most famous speech in American history. On August 28th, 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his infamous I Have a Dream speech in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Behind him was a group of 250,000 supporters. And so, Martin Luther King Jr. began his 17-minute speech. I know you wouldn't want to listen to 17 minutes of him talking, so I'll just include the most famous 2 minutes. This is an actual video including him speaking. Enjoy.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
On June 11th, 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested yet again in St. Augustine, Florida, for eating or trying to eat in a white-only restaurant. Nonetheless, MLK later on in the same year, on December 10th, won the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, Norway. Arrests just don't bother him. From March 17th to 25th of 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. responded to the violent police attacks on African American people in Selma, Alabama by peacefully leading protesters from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. For the record, that's 40 miles. Hope he rested. That's a long walk. On March 23, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. led 6,000 protesters to support the sanitation workers on strike in Memphis, Tennessee. Later on April 3rd, also in 1968, MLK delivered his final speech, "I've been to the mountaintop," also in Memphis. And we've reached the awful event. One day later, on April 4th, 1968, at 6:01 p.m. at the Lorraine Hotel, also in Memphis, Tennessee, MLK was fatally shot dead by a sniper where they are in this photo in a circle. If you look in the circle I put on this photo, you can see the window where the sniper was positioned, and you can also see the people standing next to MLK pointing to where the shot came from. The sniper was later identified in London as James Earl Ray. He was extradited to the U.S. and was sentenced to 100 years in prison, although he only served 30 since he died in prison in 1998 after many attempts of getting bailed out and getting denied. MLK was pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. on the same day. MLK was buried in Atlanta, Georgia, his home city, where he remains today. Even though MLK is no longer with us today, his effects on the world still remain, including much better care and attention we all need to give to everyone, including the African American population of the world. The world has changed so much since then, partially thanks to MLK. Later on, a few years ago, an African American museum opened up in Washington, D.C., which also partially honors him. Thanks to MLK, we have the Civil Rights Act as well, which was inspired by him, and it guarantees rights to everyone, even if you're African American. He also inspired many other civil rights activists, such as Rosa Parks and Malcolm X. And with that, thank you all for listening to my biography of Martin Luther King Jr. I hope you all enjoyed it. My next two videos will be on January 20th, and they will cover the following two topics: the inauguration of Joe Biden, and I will also be playing Hail to the Chief, the U.S. presidential anthem. And also on that day, I will be releasing a video, which is a request, and will be on each of the planets of our galaxy in space. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for watching. Enjoy your dear night. I'm Andrew, and thank you for watching.